So you're fast.
That feels like an oversimplification.
The core of the character is something that goes all the way back to ancient Greek mythology, someone who could run really fast. And the Flash is a modern interpretation of that.
The Flash is always on the forefront of every age of DC Comics. He's always represented the new and leading the charge into the future.
Found Barry Allen. No!
This character was the nexus point for what had been and what was going to happen next.
He's a very compassionate character, always trying to do the right thing and help others.
You didn't give up hope when he was around. He kind of made you smile a little bit. You always need that guy around.
He's iconic for a reason, and one of the great things about this design is that it's really easy to draw.
The fact that his costume was all red as a kid, I immediately went to my crayon box and it's like, oh, do I have a red crayon? I gotta draw that guy.
You know, when you're a kid, the idea of running fast is really fun, right?
Flying, take your flying. I love super speed as a power, and everybody can relate to that.
He's the first quantum superhero.
Flash!
Hi.
I love you!
Thank you. You seem very nice also.
Oh my God!
It's one power, but then combined with the ingenuity of whoever wields it, it can become a whole bunch of powers.
The thing that makes Flash so special, not just among DC superheroes, but among all superheroes, is that the Flash was actually the very first character to play with the multiverse.
The Flash is bigger than one guy. It's Jake Garrick, it's Wally West, it's Barry Allen. And there will probably be more characters that get to take on the mantle in the years to come.
The Flash has always been my favorite character since I was a kid. There's something about his costume, the speed, his villains. He could travel through alternate dimensions. And since Showcase Comics #4, which I do own, The Flash introduced the Silver Age of DC superheroes, the genesis and rebirth, the original rebirth of DC Comics.
The Flash is such a special character within the realm of DC. He's a more joyful character. His powers are not necessarily super strength like Superman or a dark detective like Batman. He has speed and color and brightness and an emotional roller coaster.
The Flash is the heart of the DCU. I think so much what we love about DC Comics, what I love about DC Comics, all started with The Flash.
People are able to connect to this character probably because they see, parts of themselves in the character.
Even in those great issues where he has the feeling he's being turned into a marionette, or he has a big giant head, or he's a gorilla, there's some fun to it. It's not the grim Flash. And I think that's something that's remained true for the character in every incarnation.
The worlds and stories that he's a part of are so fantastic. The time travel, the multiverse, and yet as a character, he feels emotionally grounded. And that's what I always liked about the character, because he wasn't an Amazon or an alien. He was just a guy that was hit by lightning, and he could run fast, and from there, his powers developed.
Sure, he has super speed, but he's still doing everything that he does, even though you can't see it and he rebuilds an apartment block in the blink of an eye. He's still building that thing one brick at a time, and I find that kind of funny, but also incredibly lovable and relatable.
Flying is not something that we have yet been able to do, but we run. Everybody runs. And so there comes that point where you're running and you start to think to yourself, what if I could run as fast as a car? And then what if I could run so fast that I'd just be a blur? And so there's a real wish fulfillment quality to the Flash character that you easily engage with.
As a kid, I didn't grow up particularly big or strong. So I had it in my head that if I'm small, that means I must be fast, right? And that was kind of one of the key connectors with the Flash.
It's interesting that a simple power like running fast can morph into a bunch of other different powers, whether it's using your hands as windmills to knock bad guys away, or have the super speed perception of noticing things move at a slower rate. You really begin to see the depth of what you can do if you can move at super speed.
There's optimism baked into the Flash because he's all about freedom. He's all about cutting loose and being wherever you want to be and going wherever you want to go. It is a place where hope and optimism rule. That sets a tone for the DC universe in general.
When Superman came out, his success really triggered the concept of the superpowered costumed character. And every publisher who could scrape together 15 cents started to try and find their own superheroes, DC included. One of the companies that the DC owners had a major interest in was a company called All American Comics. And that became the home of a couple of titles. One of them gave birth to The Flash, in a title called Flash Comics, of all things. That comic lasted over 100 issues, the longest run of any of the superheroes of the Golden Age period, other than the Big Three Trinity.
The original Flash was created in 1940 by Garner Fox and Harry Lampert. And he was the very first superhero among all of the early superheroes to have just one power. Everybody else could lift things and fly or deflect bullets. They were invulnerable, this and that. But speed, that was his only power. And that's all he needed.
In Flash Comics #1, they introduced Jay Garrick, who was in a lab accident and inhaled what they called hard water fumes, which never made a lot of sense to most people who read comics. But these chemicals he inhaled somehow gave him super speed, and it was fast enough to catch bullets. He was the first Flash. He wore kind of a tin hat, a little bit like a World War I helmet, and also like the god Mercury with little wings on the side, and became a founding member of the very first superhero team, the Justice Society of America. He was a major superhero in DC's original era, in the Golden Age. He was a predecessor to what would become, I guess, igniter of the Silver Age with Barry Allen, the new Flash. Without Jay Garrick, there would be no Barry Allen, and without Barry Allen, there would be no Silver Age of DC Comics. In fact, there might not be superheroes in the way they are now, because back in the mid-50s, superhero comics were not very popular. DC's superheroes, for the most part, had been canceled.
For a few years, there were almost no superhero stories. Superman came out, helped by the George Reeves starring TV show. Batman came out, Wonder Woman came out, but nobody much thought the superheroes were a viable model. In the mid-1950s, DC adopted an anthology title that would change from issue to issue called Showcase. In searching for what to do next, the idea of, well, maybe we should try one of these superhero things again. Julie Schwartz, who was one of the editors, who had worked on the original Flash comics for quite a number of years, said, all right, I'll take that on. And he got together with another one of the editors, Bob Kanigher, who was DC's most prolific writer, and they cooked up a way to bring back the Flash.
Someone at the editorial meeting suggested, I don't know who, it might have been me, say, why don't we put out the Flash again? And most everybody objected. Why put out the Flash? It flopped in 1950. What makes you think it's going to succeed in 1955? The point is, I had to put out a magazine called The Flash with a costume character who was speedy, and that's all I kept. Everything else I changed. My new version of The Flash was working in a police laboratory, I believe, and a bolt of lightning came in from a window, hit the chemicals lined up, and splashed over him. Now, mind you, a bolt of lightning travels at the speed of 186,000 miles a second. That would make it more believable.
Julie Schwartz, in particular, was a science guy. And the idea was, let's make the character about the jet age, which was all the rage. Chuck Yeager, the breaking the sound barrier, the potential of astronauts in our near future. That's what drove Julie and Robert Kanigher, the writer, to create something that is very science heavy.
The new DC heroes tended to be scientists, you know, the test pilots. They were the peak of humanity as it was seen back then. The Russians had just put Sputnik in space. And there was a call for educators and for people who were working on any material that children were reading to try and get children interested in science and the space race and that notion of a technological future for America. So Julie Schwartz really tied right into that.
Artist Carmine Infantino, who was brought onto the project, was a wonderful designer who had done some work on The Flash in the 1950s.
Oh, I remember going in for a job, and Julie said, we're going to be doing superheroes again. And I thought, oh my God. And I wasn't thrilled about the idea. But he says, Bob did the script, and he gave me his script. And Bob even laid out the very first cover, what he wanted. You know? So that I know is fact, because I was there. And that was the kickoff of all the superheroes I went after.
The Flash has, hands down, one of the best, if not the best, superhero costumes of all time. There's no way to look at that character and not know instantly what his superpowers would be.
The design that Carmine did for The Flash was revolutionary at that time because superheroes were based on the strong men of that time, right? Like the wrestlers and the bodybuilders and stuff. So there was this very common, underwear and tights look. But with the Flash, it was sleek, it was streamlined. It's still modern by today's standard because of its simplicity. It works in motion, right? Some of the other costumes can get a little bit busy when things are moving, but with the Flash, when the character is moving, you could have almost no details, you could have no face, you could have no hands, but when you see red with the streak for the lightning bolt ears, the streak from the chest, the streak from the belt, and the streak from the boots, that's more than enough of an indication that you know exactly who it is. You know, in the same way that with Batman, you just need a silhouette, and you know it's Batman.
Carmine really created the visual vocabulary of bringing a speedster to life. He would draw the Flash in different poses, and then he would circle and create a tornado, or you'd see his arm kind of flapping up and down and create a wall of force, and that really influenced generations of artists that followed him on the character.
There was this one instance where the Flash was moving towards this villain who had like this gravity gun where every time the Flash moved towards him, he would slow down because this gun would weigh him down, right? So what he started doing was he started walking backwards, and then when he did a U-turn, when he was walking backwards, for some reason, the gun didn't work anymore. And I just thought, that makes no sense. And the reason why that was such a big aha moment for me was that science is great, physics is a thing, but you're allowed to break the rules in order to make a good and fun story.
And as a writer, especially as a writer of superhero comics, the fun then comes in, well, how do you use science, how do you use real life stuff to create interesting super feats that haven't been done before? You know, he is a scientist, he's a forensic scientist when he's the Barry Allen character. And I think that's one of the great appeals of the Flash, the inventive nature of the powers. You know, Superman's very much, he'll punch through the wall or he'll fly and he'll catch the meteor. But the Flash has to work it out, and he's up against a lot of villains and characters who are all science-based.
The Flash is one of the greatest rogues galleries in all of comics. Captain Cold, Heatwave, Mirror Master, the Trickster, Abracadabra. Abracadabra is my favorite one. He's a magician from the 64th century who really just uses science. There's no magic to this, but if you're using 64th century science in the 21st century, suddenly it all looks like magic.
The better a villain is, the better a story is. It's a more interesting obstacle to overcome.
Barry Allen works in criminal forensics, and partly I think he is inspired by this desire to kind of right wrongs in the world. It's one of the reasons why he takes his job so seriously and why, ironically, he wants to slow it down, is that he wants to be really careful, he wants to get things right and do them the right way, because he has a really innate sense of moral right and wrong.
When he got the powers of the Flash, he decided he was going to be a hero. He's going, even if I'm risking my life, I want to use my powers to help others.
Barry couldn't save the most important person in his life, his mother. And as a consequence of that, he lost his father as well to the justice system. That would take any person into one or two directions. One, to completely disappear from the world, or to try to save everybody. And he chooses the right path, even when it costs him a lot to do so.
You know, there was a dash of Superman, but a dash of Batman too. He was kind of a both worlds. And so he felt, I guess, more rounded or more real than those other characters.
I always liked the idea that he was the fastest man alive, but he was always late to everything. That just put a smile on your face, that you just immediately understood that you knew people like that in your life, that were quick thinkers or they were really fast runners, but boy, they could not get to lunch on time. It just was not something they could do.
When he was hit by a bolt of lightning, at first that just meant he could run fast. And he could run up the side of buildings and create tornadoes and vibrate through walls. And then soon he was running faster and faster, and he could break the time barrier. He could travel through time. He built something called the Cosmic Treadmill to help give him accuracy about where he would travel through time, because he couldn't control it really well. And then in Flash 123, he broke through into the multiverse, the first time the multiverse had ever appeared in superhero comics, and he met the original Flash, Jay Garrick, who had been published in the 1940s and 50s.
The decision was made, let's have Barry Allen meet up with his wartime predecessor, Jay Garrick. How do we do that? And the solution that Schwartz and his team came up with was, well, parallel worlds. What if there's a parallel world where all those old stories just kept going? And it suddenly was, okay, how do we get the Flash there?
Julie Schwartz, who was also the editor of the original Flash, said, well, let's do something with the Flash and his vibrational powers that allows him to crack the barrier between universes to the multiverse beyond, where It's an identical Earth, but things are a little different.
So there's one planet Earth, but all the other planet Earths in different parallel universes all occupy the same space, separated like musical notes on a scale, and the only thing that keeps them from crashing into one big mess is vibration. And so they can never touch because they're all moving at a different rate. And the one person who can move at all of those rates is the Flash. And the brilliance of it is that if you've got an Earth 1 where the modern Flash lives, and we're now going to establish an Earth 2 where the old Flash has grown older, doesn't that mean Earth 3, 4, 5 and it never ends? So that suddenly opened everything up.
Barry Allen found Jay Garrick, and between the two of them, they began breaking barriers again throughout the entire DC universe to create the multiverse.
The Flash of Two Worlds, which is what it was called, it was pretty extraordinary to be able to suddenly go, okay, now there's a whole new way of telling stories.
It's expanded the idea of what DC Comics could do, what comics could do. It's the idea that really anything can happen. Flash is the trailblazer of the DC universe. He was a founding member of the Justice League of America, and actually one of the longest-lived Justice Leaguers, one of the most popular Justice Leaguers, who was there every issue. He was, in a way, this team's cheerleader. He was the most enthusiastic because he grew up loving superheroes as a kid, that meta angle. And so to be among all these superheroes was a joy for him.
And his girlfriend, Iris, was treated very differently than the females back in the 1940s. She was a professional. She was a main character. She earned money. She wasn't the girlfriend. She was an important reporter in Central City.
One of the tropes of superheroes is the sidekick. And suddenly, Wally West comes along. He's the Flash's biggest fan. He is the nephew of Barry Allen's girlfriend. And all he wants is to meet the Flash. Flash actually takes him under his wing, shows him how the origin happened, lightning comes down, chemicals hit me, and by incredible coincidence, the same exact thing happens to Wally. And then Barry sees a good thing and he just trains him. He gives him a little costume that looks exactly like his. Wally becomes Kid Flash, and they become partners. The multiverse, by the mid-1980s, had grown so enormous that it became confusing to readers. They came into DC Comics, is this Earth 1, is this Earth 2, is this Earth X? I don't know what I'm looking at. So Marv Wolfman and George Perez came along to DC and said, you know, we can clean all this up, but it's gonna be a huge, huge event. And that led to Crisis on Infinite Earths, which streamlined the DC universe back to one reality, one universe. To do something like that, you have to do something important to show that you're willing to really make a serious change. You have to create a shot across the bow that can be heard.
You have to start with the Flash. He has to be the central character, the one who the story builds around.
The Flash found the multiverse. Perhaps Flash is the one we sacrifice to end the multiverse.
It's one thing to get rid of all the characters nobody really remembers and nobody really cares about. It's another thing to change the lives of the characters who really matter to the readers.
The decision to kill Flash and also to kill Supergirl in that series was to show a real commitment to the idea here. This is like, we're not messing around.
It was important to make the character's death vital to the story and make it the major thing so that the fans would not think that we just tossed him away. We're killing him in a way that makes this the best Flash ending that could be. He became the major hero. He became the most important character. And the fan mail we got was, we're so sorry to see Barry go. We love the character, but wow, what a great ending.
The idea that you could take an important character who had, I think we were up to issue 350 or something like that of Flash at the time, and end the series and end the character was a very dramatic moment in comics in a way that it wouldn't be today, because we've killed everybody and brought them back at least twice.
Wally West is the only sidekick who ever actually sees the mantle. Robin is never going to become Batman. But Wally West loved being Kid Flash, and when Barry was gone, he naturally stepped into that role. And once he did, it unlocked a connection in him to something far beyond, something that Barry didn't even realize existed, which was where their powers come from. I was sitting around as the writer one day. I was trying to think, okay, he can run faster than light. What do you experience? What is that like? there must be something else out there. Is that something that feeds these speedsters? Is that a commonality among Jay Garrick and Barry Allen and Wally? And from that came the Speed Force. The idea of there being something out there beyond that gives them their incredible velocity.
What it did was it allowed all the speedster characters to consolidate around a really simple idea, that they all in some way drew their powers from a kind of extra-dimensional source. When the Flash hits the speed of light, something happens where he basically enters an information field and he becomes pure information, which means he knows everything that's happening and then can come out of that field with extra power, with anything basically that a writer wants.
When Wally first took on the mantle, he was struggling. He loved his uncle, he idolized his uncle, and there was always this feeling in the back of his mind that he was never going to be good enough.
You related to him because he had a little bit of a self-confidence issue. You know, he didn't think he was the best. He's just trying his best.
When I took on the book, I took that as a challenge. How does Wally mature into the role? By defeating Professor Zoom, the Reverse Flash, his uncle's greatest nemesis, and defeating him in a way that Barry Allen never could. It gave him a confidence as a character, and it gave him an expanded role in the DC universe. And from there on, he really felt like the Flash to me and to the readers. He became a bedrock character for that line of DC Comics in the 90s.
Once we get into the new century, there was a desire to go back. And Jeff Johns had a big idea for bringing back Barry Allen that had been inspired by what he'd done with the Green Lantern Rebirth. He saw the potential for a Flash rebirth.
Part of the reason that Barry didn't come back is because Wally West was so successful. Wally West had such a great emotional storyline because he lost his hero, his uncle, and he was trying to pick up the legacy for him. That's a built-in emotional storyline. Barry Allen didn't have that. Rebirth gave us the opportunity to go back and say, well, this is why becoming the Flash made his life better. One of the things I love about legacy in DC is that it can be two things. It can be somebody like Jay Garrick to Barry Allen, which is just you're inspired by that person, or it can be family, like Barry Allen to his nephew Wally West, or the Tornado Twins, who were the kids of Barry Allen and Iris, or Impulse, the grandson of Barry Allen from the far future. The dynasty of the Flash spans across centuries, and it should, because the Flash is all about time travel.
That's a lot of different powers and different characteristics, and depending on who's writing it, everything's different.
The pedigree of writing Flash is very high. Some of the greatest people in comics have written the Flash. They're all people who don't just love the Flash, they really love DC Comics and DC Comics history, all the different eras, they love all of it. And because so much of the Flash is also about legacy and being able to share that legacy, there's something about being able to add to that mythology that's pretty awesome.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Flash! This crime fighter is swifter than the speed of light, fleeter than the rapidity of thought.
What makes the Flash so translatable for, movies or television or whatever is it's extremely a visual power.
Outside of comics, no one had heard of the Flash until 1967. And that's when he got his own cartoon show, kind of. He was part of a rotating wheel of superheroes, Green Lantern and Atom and Hawkman and whatever, that were part of a Superman, Aquaman cartoon block. Then he showed up on the Super Friends cartoon once or twice, became a full-fledged member of the Super Friends when it became a series called Challenge of the Super Friends.
Flash didn't show up a lot in the Super Friends, in part because with the very limited animation that Hanna-Barbera was doing in those years, you couldn't make a guy go really fast, realistically.
Then the Batman movie came along, and DC realized it had potential there for not just The Dark Knight, but for all of its heroes.
The John Wesley Shipp Flash TV show was huge when I was a kid. It was a big deal that there was a Flash TV show.
The thing that impresses me about the Flash is generally he's the everyman who gets these extraordinary abilities. And the thing I loved about our version in 1990 and attracted me to the part was his first reaction was, I don't want them. And then to avenge the death of his brother, he takes them on. So it's all about personal relationships, about the reluctant hero.
15 sightings of the Flash in the past 5 days.
I am only doing what I have to do. Barry Allen is always trying to do the right thing. His heart is in the right place, and bless his heart, his head is sometimes just trying to catch up, you know?
I know what you're feeling. I'm you. I'm not an experiment. I'm a human being.
We knew that we were on the cutting edge of a new way of telling these stories. My job was to play Barry Allen truthfully enough that the audience would connect with me as a human being dealing with extraordinary circumstances, sometimes not very well, identify with that so that when I went into the suit, they came with me. And then we were all looking at the world from inside the suit out.
How do you do it? The speed, I mean.
It just happens.
I love that TV show. I think that John Wesley Shipp totally nailed Barry Allen. I think the tone of the show nailed the optimism, but also the skills it would take, the discipline it would take to have that superpower.
Hey, give me a break. I'm the fastest man alive. And even I can't be in 5 places at once.
When I had to use him in the Justice League, I quickly learned to hate his powers, because if the Flash is literally as fast as he's supposed to be, you don't need 6 other Justice Leaguers. He could take on anybody if he was just smart enough. So that was always a challenge in writing Flash stories, was like, okay, how do we write Flash so that somebody can conceivably oppose him credibly? The thing that I enjoyed the most about the Flash when we used him at the Justice League series was the goofy brashness of him.
Check it out.
Everybody else is super serious, not so much the Flash. He brings the levity.
He was optimistic, enthusiastic. He had a good energy.
Which is why we decided to make him Wally West and not Barry Allen, just to make him younger and a little bit more Gen Z.
I'm the Flash, the fastest man alive.
You told us.
This sort of combination of Wally's personality with the classic Barry Allen Flash look, I think came across beautifully.
I think more people could relate to the Flash, maybe, because he was just the guy. He was just kind of naive and a little ignorant and, didn't always say the right things, but that's kind of what guys do.
Dibs on the Amazon.
Secret is, he really is that character. He is that guy. He's unashamed of almost anything. He'll just tell you what he's thinking. His personality melded perfectly with the character that we were trying to create.
Bye-bye.
I'm the Flash. Greg Berlanti, the producer and co-creator of the Flash TV show, had a saying: every good Flash story has an element of heart, a lot of humor,
Lightning gave me abs,
and a lot of spectacle. And that touchstone became the mantra for the television show. And I think that applies to almost every major Flash story in history.
You really did it this time, Barry. Seriously? Yeah, seriously.
Barry Allen had about him a very sort of golly gee Williker kind of look at the DC world. He was always mesmerized by all these superheroes that were around him.
Cool.
And so he was really like a comic fan in the universe. He was very much a fanboy himself. And it's great when you have that kind of person at the center of a show, the show can be a lot lighter and can sort of have that effervescence that his characters always had.
There's a real joy to Grant's portrayal of the Flash. You can tell this guy loves moving at super speed. He enjoys being the Flash. There's no burden to it. It is an opportunity. And it comes through completely in his performance.
Flash, thanks. We're all just part of the same team. Speaking of teams, where the hell is Alan?
Sorry, man. Sorry. Hey, heard my name. The reason I connected with Barry so early on was how much of myself can I naturally and organically bring to this character. I really connected with his sensitivity and his openness, and, it made him really human.
How many times are we gonna go through this, Snart?
Barry Allen always had a hero's heart. And so you have that kind of do-gooder, or a person with the heart of gold, who was a little meeker, who was sort of picked on for being an absent-minded professor and always late to things and never really moved fast enough in his life. And suddenly you give that person super speed. And there are so many things that they can do and be, and he can finally live up to, he feels like, the potential to finally do the great things that he was meant to do.
Greg really wanted to create a Flash show that embraced the comics, and we took the emotional core I had created in the Flash Rebirth and built a show around it. I remember back then it was like, we're gonna make it the most comic book DC show that's ever been made.
I went back in time. Doing so, I created an alternate timeline, a whole new existence. It's complicated.
Our Barry, early on especially, was pretty awkward and goofy and really sensitive and led with his heart. And I thought, separated him in a lot of ways from a lot of the other heroes that are out there. A lot of heroes can get lost in the hero. He is such an open hero and an eager hero and a willing hero. And especially in our journey, the way he did lean on the people around him and wasn't just the guy that wanted to do it on his own, while still being stubborn, which was something that I could also still relate to.
It's time for Flash to vanish in crisis.
The Flash show, just like the character in the books, pioneered an entire generation of TV shows. Without the Flash and the success of Flash, you wouldn't have seen all those other shows.
Here we go!
I think our show in particular was always so family-oriented. Over the years, I've had a lot of people tell me that this is the only show the whole family watches together. That's really special to me.
I can't save us this time.
No, you can't. But the Speed Force can.
Grant embodied the Flash in a way that made him feel lovable and relatable and powerful at the same time. He made the Flash a fan favorite for generations to come. He really did.
This is Barry Allen, AKA The Flash, AKA The Scarlet Speedster, AKA The Crimson Crusader.
Comic books offer us this way of interpreting the world through these super versions of ourselves that are able to deal with the problems of the world in ways that are, yes, outside of our ability, but they represent some deeper psychological remedies to a lot of those modern problems.
Dad. Whatever happens, I want you to know. Your kid was one of them, Dad. One of the best of the best.
Whether it be Superman, Flash, or Wonder Woman, they sort of cast them in their alter ego first and model that to who they are as people. So that allows the character, when you have to put on this theatrical costume, because he's grounded, it allows you to accept the superhero version in a much easier way.
If you get your powers back, you can go anywhere. You can go another timeline, another universe. Why do you want to stay and fight to save this one?
Because this is the world where my mom lives.
What I find very special about Barry Allen is that he's a guy that has experienced injustice firsthand. He has a childhood trauma that it goes very deep. And even though he comes out as a funny character, he's a pretty tragic character, especially in this movie.
I can fix things. You could also destroy everything.
This movie is really inspired by two comic books that audiences and fans will hopefully recognize. Flash of Two Worlds by Gardner Fox and Carmine Infantino, and then Flashpoint by Jeff Johns and Andy Kubert.
With Flashpoint, I'd always want to tell a story about overcoming grief. And I did that by looking at, why we want to be a police scientist and work in a crime lab. And I thought, to solve a murder, to solve an unsolvable murder. So it came with the whole backstory of his mom being killed, his dad arrested for it, and him trying to solve that crime. And when we did Flashpoint, I knew that ultimately Barry wakes up and the world's different. It's chaotic and horrible, but his mom's alive. And he had to make the choice to put it back. And that was a really hard choice for him to make. But it was a choice that ultimately led to him being able to put the past aside and move forward.
Barry, this is inevitable. We can try 1,000,000 times, and we're not going to be able to fix this. No matter what we do, this world dies.
There's something really basic and human about the story. We all have things in our past that we wish didn't happen, and we all struggle with trying to rectify them, wondering what could have gone differently, what could we have done differently. And a lot of people live with sort of the pain of trying to solve problems in their past.
Please work.
He's evolving this path of superhero, but he doesn't quite understand the ripples that this superpower creates. He taps into the Speed Force, and what's exciting is that he discovers the ability to travel back in time.
I kind of love the idea that if you go back in time and just change one simple thing, you can end up with two versions of the same person who are wildly different. So writing two different versions of Barry Allen is super challenging, but also really, really fun. And it was fun kind of playing with the ways in which the two Barrys are the same and the ways in which they are completely opposite.
Do me a favor and promise me that meeting me isn't gonna screw up space-time. Broski? I got you. Shit, I'm in so much trouble.
I'm really influenced by the Silver Age. So Barry Allen, who starts in 1950 and goes till Crisis on Infinite Earths, it's what drew me into the character when I started reading the comics. And the tone and attitude of that Barry Allen is what I've always been keenly interested in exploring. I've always really enjoyed him as someone who lacks the self-assurance and the cockiness that we generally associate with superheroism.
He makes mistakes. In fact, he makes mistakes all the time, and everything he does is basically a mistake. You can say that.
I'm sorry. I'm not very good with people, even myself.
I love that they adapted Flashpoint, like literally the story, but also thematically and emotionally, the idea that Barry struggles with loss and grief and chooses to go back in time and rescue his mother, and it has consequences.
This is a journey from someone who refuses to give up hope to someone who can finally find the acceptance that makes healing possible.
One of the themes that is important in this movie is that we have to make peace with the things that we cannot change.
I'm back.
I think it's an important parable because it's something that relates to all of us.
If I had to pick one word for the importance of the Flash character, legacy.
Sometimes, in order to find your purpose as a hero, you got to take a couple steps back.
He's been around for close to 80 years, and people just keep coming back to him, and they keep passing that legacy down from Jay to Barry to Wally and all the other speedsters.
You okay, kid? I'll be fine.
One of the real joys of The Flash is that each character had their own particular way of dealing with this power.
They were much more realistic than so many of the other comic book characters that were out there.
His powers, his stories, his tone, that's what's going to keep the character around forever because he's so unique among superheroes.
He's a god archetype who's also a very normal human in some ways.
Dude, come on, irresistible!
Man, it feels good to be back.
Yeah!
He cares. He cares about people. He cares about doing the right thing. And we need more of those people in the world.
I have these powers. If I can't go back and fix what I broke, we're not gods, we're men.
A lot of what exists in the DC universe and now the multiverse, none of it can really work without the Flash.
Barry, run!
So in that regard, he's really important to the fabric of DC.
Okay, it's okay. You're okay. Come on. Jesus, they're fast. Yes, but not as fast as us.
He will outlive all of us, that's for sure.
I like your outfit. It seems
Freaking
comfy.
Yours is pretty cool.
Smooth.
Seems safe and
breathable.